So the committee has spoken, and the complaining is loud, and it's obnoxious, and they got it as close to right as you can get it. And you're sitting there, and you're going to tell me, Doug, Florida State is undefeated, and they won in a Power 5 league. They don't have their quarterback, Jordan Travis, for the remainder of the season. And though we've seen Ohio State get in a couple of years ago and Cardale Jones led them to a national championship, a couple of things should be pointed out. One, I was on team Ohio State doesn't belong in. I thought their resume was flimsy back then and they had a third-string quarterback, but alas, okay, I was on team Ohio State didn't belong. So I am consistent with this. The second thing is that Ohio State team played one game with Cardale Jones at quarterback before playing in the playoffs and won 59-0 over Wisconsin. And whether or not Wisconsin was as good or is better than Louisville this year, but whatever, everything that looked like 59-0 was a complete and utter drubbing. We've seen two starts without Jordan Travis, and they've looked pedestrian at best. And then you can't compare the SEC or even the Texas's resume or the Pac-12 or the Big Ten with the ACC. If you have five leagues, okay, it's towards the bottom. It's the bottom of the top five leagues. Now that doesn't mean that Florida State's at the bottom of the five leagues. Florida State went out and beat LSU to start the year. But overall, Miami's down, Virginia Tech's down, Clemson is down, and North Carolina is good, but not as good as people hope they could be. And you have a Florida State team that survived, advanced, and you can pick apart any team's resume you want. Georgia can feel like it's no fair. We go undefeated for 2 years, and all of a sudden we lose one game, a close one in the SEC championship game, and we're out. Oregon can sit there and go, hey, people thought that they were a 9-point favorite. What a game Friday night, right? They lose by a field goal twice to Washington. They're out. Ohio State loses one game this season on the road at Michigan. They're out. So it's not an equitable system. It's never been fair. But the idea is very simple. The idea is to try and find the four best teams, period. Not the four most deserving teams, not anything carrying it. And every argument you have has a counter argument, which is likely much stronger. Here's Boo Corrigan, who, of course, is the committee chair, on the decision to exclude Florida State.
Florida State is a different team than they were through the first 11 weeks. Coach Norvell, their players, their fans, an incredible season. But as you look at who they are as a team right now, without Jordan Travis, without the offensive dynamic that he brings to it, they are a different team. And the committee voted Alabama 4 and Florida State 5.
I mean, look, I think, and I know I'm not wrong on this one, they're not even seen as the fifth best team. Right? Look, Florida State plays Georgia tomorrow. Who do you think's going to win? Florida State plays Oregon tomorrow. Who do you think's going to win? Right? Florida State plays Ohio State tomorrow. Who do you think's going to win? You're like, well, that's not the point. Actually, that is the point. If you can't get the point of us finally cutting through the crap of the pomp circumstance, well, Alabama, it's everybody cowering to the SEC. Here's a news flash for you. If anyone on earth has earned the right to, if it's close, get in, it's the SEC. Right? You've been dominant for 25 years. You allocate more resources to it. It does, in fact, mean more. And look, I understand Florida State went through a period where they were in that area, right? They were that 14 years where they finished top 4 or better. That was an amazing run. That hasn't been the case recently. But the true test is you just ask people, in all honesty, do you think Georgia or Florida State? Bama or Florida State? And you're like, well, Texas comes from the Big 12. It's not any good. Okay, They lost the rivalry game. They led the whole time. They should have won the game. They beat Alabama at Alabama, which is better than anybody else's win. And then they went through the conference. I understand they could have lost to Kansas State. That would have ended this thing. The difference is, if they didn't have Ewers, then they wouldn't get in. Simple. Because you know what? When they didn't have their starting quarterback, they weren't as good. It's the old, there's a starter for a reason. And now it's even more pronounced than it was previously because now it's really hard to keep depth. There's talk of Arch Manning transferring because Ewers is coming back. Quinn Ewers is coming back to Texas. Because nobody wants to sit for a year, let alone 2 years. So your backups are weaker than they've been. You lose your starting quarterback. And let's just be honest, the ACC is not seen as the level of league of the SEC, of the Pac-12, of the Big Ten. And I don't think the Big 12 was great this year. But when Texas had their starting quarterback, they were better than everybody else, including Oklahoma. And you're like, well, Oklahoma beat them. Like, okay, I can make the same argument for Oklahoma State is better than Oklahoma. Oklahoma is better than Oklahoma State. They didn't beat them, but they're better than them. So all this complaining. Here's E.J. Manuel, of course, played quarterback at Florida State, on the ACC huddle on Florida State being left out.
The reaction one is Jordan has nothing to be sorry about.
Right.
Yeah. First and foremost, Jordan Travis, you have nothing to be sorry about. This entire team, you have nothing to hang your head about. This is wrong, plain and simple. I think this goes against every single thing that you're taught as a Little League player, that it's about the team. It's not about one player. It's not about the quarterback. It's not just about the middle linebacker. It's not about the coach at times. And it seems like that's kind of been the situation in this entire debacle, the way I see it, because if you, as the committee chair, Boo Corrigan, who I respect a ton, says that Florida State is not the same team without their starting quarterback, Jordan Travis, that's obvious. We all know that. I agree with that, too. Right. But ultimately, this team still found a way to be undefeated. Yeah. So what's the problem? If you can go 13-0, you deserve a chance to then battle an opportunity to go to war one more time with your brothers in a semifinal in the college football playoff, bar none.
By the way, Boo Corrigan's an ACC guy. He's the athletic director at NC State. He previously worked at Duke. He previously worked at Notre Dame, which is a quasi-ACC school. So we act like these guys, but what E.J. Manuel did kind of talk out of both sides of his mouth. They're not as good without Jordan Travis. Duh. Everybody agrees with that. Correct. And this is not about, well, you deserve a shot. No, you don't. Sorry. It's one of those, there's a club, a nightclub, if you will. And do we let everybody in? Next year, a lot more spots. This year, really small VIP room. I will throw this out. College football has not only never been fair, but there is a world where you sit there and go like, hey, what if it was the old system? Because the old system wouldn't look all that much different from this system. The old system would have the Rose Bowl be Michigan versus Washington, which is what it should have been this year. Instead, it's Michigan versus Alabama. It would have had in the Sugar Bowl, Alabama against Texas. And then the Orange Bowl likely would have been Ohio State versus Florida State. Right? Like that's not bad. Right? Then you throw out there in Fiesta. Fiesta would be the next two, whoever the next two left are. Right? Fiesta could be Oregon versus Penn State, maybe? How good would that game be? So it's amazing to me on how we progressed and regress all at the same time. We always think a playoff makes it more fair. Sometimes it makes it less fair. We went to 4 teams to try and keep it exclusive. I've always been a proponent of 8 teams, not 12, with the idea in mind that if you're a conference champion, you get an automatic spot of the Power 5, then the top 3 get in. Okay, that would mean Florida State would be in. That would mean probably Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State would all be in. Right, that would be probably what it looks like. That would be relatively fair if you want. And if you want to celebrate, we'd be arguing over Penn State versus LSU or Ole Miss. That would be the real argument. And we'll have more of that next year. But as the system sits now, I think they got it more right than they got it wrong. Or I think any other decision would have left you thinking they got it more wrong than they did. Don't get me wrong, undefeated looks like undefeated. But we saw this in college basketball when Kenyon Martin got hurt for Cincinnati and they got moved from the 1 line to the 2 line. That's what happened here. They didn't say Florida State stinks. They just said they're not one of the top 4 teams. And no one's arguing with that. No one with any sort of pulse or reasoning. And the other part to it is you go, well, they could win a game. First of all, I don't believe they could win a game in the semifinals. And most people don't. Those teams are too good to not have your quarterback. But the second part is that doesn't mean you get in. You use all the metrics. You try and find the top 4 teams. And do you honestly think, this is the only question, do you honestly think that today, without Jordan Travis, Florida State is better than any of the 4 teams selected, or even than Georgia or Ohio State? And I think you throw in there Penn State. And probably Ole Miss and LSU again. And LSU, obviously, they beat. Give me your thoughts. This is Booger McFarland, by the way, on the College Football Playoff Reveal show on Florida State being left out.
This is a travesty to the sport because we go out there on the field and we play the game. And regardless of whether it looks good at the quarterback position, regardless whether we win with offense, whether we win with defense, the name of the game is to win. And that's a reason never before has this not been done. Winning a Power 5 conference, going undefeated, and not getting into the playoff. So I understand we want to look at style points and who are we going to get for the best matchups. But that's not what this is about. This is about understanding to get the 4 best teams. One team has a loss, and that's Alabama. One team doesn't in Florida State. And the fact that this committee could take a Power 5 conference champion that's undefeated, those kids have went out there and busted their behind and not get into the playoff based on the eye test. Mind you, this is the same Alabama team who needed a prayer in Jordan Hare to beat an Auburn team that lost to New Mexico State. So that's really what has me bothered right now.
Okay, I mean, Texas needed a missed field goal to be by Kansas State to beat Kansas State in overtime. Florida State needed some help with Jordan Travis beating Boston College, who stinks. They all saw their own life pass before their eyes. Like, we're really going to hold the Iron Bowl? The fact that the Iron Bowl, they needed a miracle in the Iron Bowl against them, like, it's a gigantic rivalry game. We act like this is some travesty of justice. They tried to find the 4 best teams. Did anybody ask Booger, Bama plays Florida State tomorrow. Who's better? You're a football guy, in your opinion. He was, well, that's not the point. That's exactly the point. Well, the point is, the point is very simple. The committee told you a long time ago. And you're like, wait a second, wait. The records, then why do the records do matter. But you have to contextualize every sort of record, right? That's what you have to do. And everyone in the sport knows that even if the SEC is down, so to speak, right, that it's without any question the hardest conference in the country. Remember, this is an Alabama team that, yeah, they survived Auburn. It was a miracle that they won that game. They had to beat a Kentucky team on the road. They dominated them. Same Kentucky team, by the way, that beat Louisville, a game that Louisville that just last week, 2 weeks ago, and then Louisville gave Florida State a good game. They beat LSU. They beat Tennessee. They beat A&M on the road, Mississippi State on the road, Ole Miss, and lost to Texas. And then they beat Georgia. Beating Georgia in Atlanta, the first team in 2 years to do so, is better than anything Florida State has done. The schedule is far more difficult, and they have their starting quarterback. If Jordan Travis was still playing, they would be in, and it would be interesting. I think Alabama would be out. I don't know if Alabama or Texas would be out. Probably Alabama. And again, like, you can even judge by the Michigan reaction when they found out they were playing Alabama. You think they would have been happy if they're playing Florida State? Because they sure as hell weren't happy they're playing Alabama.